Wednesday, 1 p.m. Victim found on a crowded Ankh-Morpork street. Shot through the face by some kind of long-range weapon. Unrecognizable. Looks like to identify him I'll have to rifle through his pockets. Yeah! Bow, bow, bow. Welcome back to the Library of Alexandria, and today we will be talking about, boom, Men-at-Arms. This is the second book in the City Watch books by Terry Pratchett that take place in Discworld. We saw them last in Guards with Captain Vimes and Sergeant Colin, with Lance Constable Carrot and Corporal Nobby facing off against a dragon. Also in that book we had Lady Sybil Ramkin, the very, very wealthy keeper of dragons, and Vetinari the patrician, who's really supposed to be kind of analogous to Niccolo Machiavelli and the Medici family. So here we're back with Vimes, Colin, Nobby, and Carrot, but now the Watch has been forced by Vetinari to diversify the Watch, and so they have now in the Watch there is a troll, a dwarf, a woman, and also a werewolf, which Discworld classifies as undead, even though I particularly wouldn't classify it as undead. Where in Guards, the mystery revolved around who was it that actually summoned the dragon, and how were these incompetent watchmen going to defeat the dragon. Here, the mystery revolves around this stolen artifact called the Gone, which it's a gun, guys. It's a gun. This gun is stolen from the Assassin's Guild, and it is being used to kind of snipe at people all over the city. And while initially it seems that the mystery is clear, if not how, then who, the mystery kind of turns on its head to where we are trying to figure out not only how, but also who really. This is set with the backdrop of Captain Vimes getting married to Lady Sybil Ramkin. He's got 2 days left on duty, and then he is retiring to civilian life, and someone else is going to have to take over the Watch. And so Vimes' main arc in this one is kind of dealing with letting go of the Watch, which he says he wants to do, but I mean, this is Vimes. He's never been anything but a watchman, and so he's having a little trouble letting go. But the stars of this book are the new recruits. We have Lance Constable Cuddy, who is a dwarf. We have Lance Constable Detritus, who is a troll, and trolls in the Discworld they're not weak against fire and regenerate like Dungeons and Dragons trolls, which are the trolls that I grew up with. Instead, trolls are kind of made out of rock in this. They're kind of rock monsters, and they're huge and dumb and, you know, break things. And then we have Lance Constable Angua, who is the woman that has been added to the Watch as well. And so Men-at-Arms really introduced us to these three characters. They are excellent additions to the Watch. I love Cuddy and Detritus and Angua. They are three of my favorite non-main Watchmen that appear in later books as well. So I'm a big fan of all three of them. They all three offer something different to the Watch. First of all, even though Detritus is dumb because he's a troll, and trolls are just generally dumb as kind of a species, but these three, Cuddy, Detritus, and Angua, seem just generally more aware and more competent than the other guardsmen, at least as far as Guards was concerned. They seem definitely more aware than Nobby and Colin, maybe not Carrot, who is, you know, the ultimate paladin of the books. Now, I've read this book before, like 3 times, so when I read this the 4th time, it's a really, kind of had to look at it a little differently because of just kind of what's going on in the world. Because the main theme of this book is racism, and the main characters are good cops. And so those two things, just kind of with what's going on in the world right now, forced me to kind of look at it a little differently. But the racism theme here running through it it's not subtle, it's not hidden, it's all very, I mean, it's a Discworld book. There's not a ton of nuance to be handled with it. It's very overt and kind of simplistic. It deals a lot with cultural racism, and I'm trying to be real careful about what I'm saying. If I'm offending anybody with what I'm trying to say, please understand that I did not mean it that way. I'm just trying to adequately convey what I'm talking about here. is, while all racism is abhorrent, these people, the Watch, the humans in the Watch, if you will, Vimes, Colin, and Nobby, and even to some extent Carrot, they are not overtly racist, meaning they don't mean to be racist. They just are a product of their upbringing and their environment. I grew up in the South. I grew up with that kind of cultural feeling about race, where it's just really bizarre to where people that I know are nice to everyone that they meet or interact with on a personal level, but then when it comes to a broader context, some of the things that the people in the South say, you're just like, that is super racist. And yet they don't treat individuals the way they talk about just kind of race as a whole. It's just super bizarre, and that's not what this review's about, but it's kind of like that cultural racism of ignorance, if you will. And you've got all like the stereotypical racist things. Now here they're not talking about different races of human, they're talking about different races, i.e. species, trolls, dwarves, the undead, and then of course women, which Colin really doesn't think that women belong in the Watch. One of the things he says is that, well, we're men of the Watch, meaning humans, and male humans specifically. Some of the other really like stereotypical racist things that you hear these people say, even when they're trying to kind of defend their own point of view. We have Vimes saying that all dwarves look alike. He's mad at Vetinari for forcing what he calls affirmative action on the Watch. Vetinari forces Vimes to open up the Watch to the other races. I already talked about Colin thinking only men should be in the Watch, but even Carrot, when they go in and end up, their investigation ends up taking him to kind of a boarding house for the undead in Ankh-Morpork. And Carrot, while he has no problem with dwarves or trolls or women in the Watch, he doesn't like undead, of which werewolves are categorized. And so he sees the undead and he says they're not our kind of people, and wishes they, the undead, would go back where they came from, which Angua, who is with him, replies, most of them came from here, bud. Meaning they're from Ankh-Morpork. Carrot is just being ignorant and stupid. So, but as the story goes on, we start seeing people who are much more hateful in their bigotry, like overt. Pratchett, and really Vimes, describes them as people who knowingly say people of their type think that they're better than the people using the slurs that they have for dwarves. Dwarves are slurred with grit suckers because they're, under the dirt all the time, and then trolls are called rocks as kind of speciesist slurs there. But there's these guys who are like, ugh, they're not our type of people. And Vimes hates them even worse because they think that they're better than just the, run-of-the-mill racists in the street. And there's a running joke where Lance Constable Cuddy, who is the dwarf, can't get anyone to tell them what it is they say about dwarves. Because anytime someone's trying to defend something bad they have to say about dwarves, they'll be like, well, you know what they say about dwarves? And Cuddy's like, no, I don't. What do they say about dwarves? And so the conversation will just keep going on, and you'll hear Cuddy from the side being, hey, by the way, do you know what it is they say about dwarves? Because no one will actually tell him because he's a dwarf. And it's really hilarious the way that this is handled. It all resolves a little simplistically. I mean, I wish that all bigotry could just be solved in a 300-page Discworld book, but at the end, it kind of comes Vimes and Colin and Knobs and Carrot having spent time with these other recruits and seeing just how hateful the other people in Ankh-Morpork can be, to the point where it literally ends up causing riots. They stop thinking of Carrot, they stop thinking of Cuddy and Angua and Detritus in terms of their species and start thinking of them as members of the Watch. Vimes ends up saying, ain't no dwarves or trolls or women in the Watch, only watchmen, meaning none of that matters. They're all part of the Watch. On the other social commentary level, Pratchett makes a really salient point about the class divide, about poor versus rich. Because Vimes has always been poor, and Lady Ramkin is one of the richest, if not the richest woman in Ankh-Morpork, Pratchett and Vimes talk about how Ramkin was the was the kind of wealthy person and was so wealthy that she didn't have to spend money. And he gives an example of his boots, a watchman's boots. A really good pair of boots costs $50, but an okay pair of boots, which is the kind that Vimes can afford, costs $10. The problem is that a $10 pair of boots wears out every 6 months. So every 6 months, Vimes has to buy another $10 pair of boots because he needs the boots and cannot afford to buy the $50 pair of boots. But the $50 pair of boots lasts for years. So if you look at a 10-year period of time, the guy who paid $50 for the nice pair of boots has spent over time less money on boots than the poor person, aka Sam Vimes, because he has to keep buying the cheap stuff. And if you think that's how it is now, when I didn't have any money, I spent more money because the only stuff I could afford was the stuff that would break and wear out. And so I had to replace it more often over time, spending a larger amount of money. And this one example, this is much more subtle than the racism theme in there. This just the contrast between people who are poor and have always been poor versus the Ramkins of the world who are wealthy and have always been so. So that was just another interesting thing that is kind of undergirding the rest of the plot of Men at Arms. Pratchett's writing is, as always, hilarious, filled with puns, and I think, on a side note, I think that Discworld books are meant to be read, not listened to via audiobook, because he does a lot with homophones, with words that sound the same, but on paper look differently. He uses a different word on purpose as kind of like visual wordplay, visual word puns, which I really like. And I think it's easier to process those when you're reading them. One example from this book that I thought was hilarious is it's talking about the difference between someone as uncivilized as Corporal Nobbs versus someone at the height of civilization in Lady Ramkin. The Ramkins were more highly bred than a hilltop bakery. You get it? Highly bred, hilltop bakery. Whereas Corporal Nobbs had been disqualified from the human race for shoving. And that is just a brilliant example, like boom, boom, 1-2 punch of pun in a single sentence. And that's just a perfect example of what Pratchett does so well in his writing. Pratchett does a lot of world building in this one as well, much more than in Guards. The guilds really shine in this. The big ones in this, we have the Assassin's Guild, the Clowns Guild, and the Beggars Guild, and the Seamstresses Guild. Carrot doesn't understand why 80-something% of women in Ankh-Morpork put down their profession as seamstress. It's the job that women who are down on their luck seem to get, and it's the guild they join. And he doesn't understand why most of the seamstresses do their work at night, and why so many gentlemen come to have their clothes mended at the Seamstress Guild. But the main ones, the ones at the very forefront, are the Assassin's Guild and the Clowns Guild. Clowning, they say, is a very serious business. And the joke about the Clowns Guild is the juxtaposition of what clowning is supposed to be, how clowns are supposed to be funny, but the members of the Clowns Guild are the most serious-minded, dreary, just morose people on the planet. They are not jolly at all, and their leader, Dr. Whiteface, is like the meanest clown of all. But there is something interesting in it. At one point, they have to go to what's called the Hall of Faces, where each clown is identified by his face makeup, and no other clown can have that face makeup. And in the Hall of Faces, there's an egg painted with that clown's facial markings, and no other clown can get that, and that's how you identify him. Well, this is, if you weren't aware, this is actually real. I have a friend who used to be a clown. He had his clown name and his face is registered to him and to that clown name. No other clown can have that exact same configuration of colors and, face paint. And that's bizarre. And I learned this, and we're going to go off topic for here. I learned this because for the past 4-5 years, I've been invited along with my theater professor and good friend. We have been, and the friend who I was talking about that used to be a clown, we have been judges at our local Shriners clown competition. I need you to let that sink in. Clown competition with the Shriners. And this is no joke, guys. And it's a tale of tragedy. The first year I went, there were like 30 something clowns there. And my buddy who had gone like 2 years prior to that said it was even larger then. So the first year I went, bunch of clowns, and we judged them on their types, because there's different types. There's tramp clown, there's whiteface, there's senior, there's a bunch of different categories for clown, and I'm not going to get into all that. But they also do skits by themselves or partners, which is just, clown joking around, and we grade them and rate them. And then there's the balloon animal category. But after that first year, every year it's gotten smaller and smaller because, and get this, guys, there was a schism in the clown community. What on earth can cause a schism in the clown community? And so because of this schism, fewer clowns were coming down to Panama City to participate in this particular contest, because there was hurt feelings and bizarre. Guys, it is the most surreal thing that I have ever done in real life, this clown judging thing. And I'm not kidding. But if you can ever go to a clown competition, the Shriners do it. I'm sure they don't just do it down here. Go. It's bizarre. Bizarre. So that is a real thing, the Hall of Faces. And the final thing that this book is really about is the acceptance or the rejection of power. And this is dealt with the gun itself, and remember, Carrot is the long-lost king. He's from the ancestral king bloodline, and Carrot knows. And also, we see kind of the Vetinari knows. And there's this final conversation at the end between Carrot and Vetinari that is just undergirded with threat, but also camaraderie, as Carrot and Vetinari talk about where the word policeman and politician have the similar roots, and they're both kind of doing what they feel is best for the city that they love. But there's also, threat from both sides, and it's just a really, really well-written scene there at the end. And then, of course, we have the gun, and whether or not someone will pick it up and use it because of the power it gives you, or if you will throw it away because no one needs that kind of destroying power. So Men-at-Arms is great. The problems that I have with it are that we don't actually spend much time with the old watch. Vimes, Colin, and Nobby are hardly in this book, and I realize it needs to make way for the newcomers, for Carrot's promotion, and then Angua, Detritus, and Cuddy, I know need time to be developed, and I do love that about this book. But I love Captain Vimes, and the fact that Vimes has been really kind of given a back row seat to this book makes me not love this quite as much as Guard's Guard. Same thing with Nobby and Colin, which are my favorite duo, really. They're also not given much to do, especially Nobby. I can't even remember more than like a couple scenes Nobby is in. So that makes me not enjoy it quite as much as Guards. On the Kingfin approval system, I give this an excellent plus. It's easy to read. I read it in 2 days. I like it a lot. I just don't rank it up there quite as much as Guards. If you've read Guards, you should definitely read this because it's fantastic. And, we're leading us into Feet of Clay. It's part of the Guards storyline. I think Guards, Men-at-Arms, and Feet of Clay are the strongest of the Guards books, the original 3. I don't like the later ones quite as much, but it's definitely worth a read. I don't think it's quite as funny in places as Guards. I don't think there's as much kind of wordplay humor as is going on in the first book, and I think that's just because largely he's poking fun at society through the lens of these ignorantly bigoted watchmen and their new recruits. So that's about it, guys. If you've read the Guards series, let me know what your favorite Guards book is. If you read Men-at-Arms, let me know what you thought as well. I'll see you next time, guys, and as always, thanks for watching.